Beastmaster didn't rise from Hollywood fantasy. It crawled out of fire and danger. A desert that burned, animals that answered to no one, and a production held together by instinct alone. But beneath the bare steel and sun-bleached skin, it was survival dressed as destiny. A myth carved from a sci-fi tale and reborn feral. A spark behind the cameras turning the set into a battleground. A saga pulled from extinction by fans who refused to let it die. These are 12 weird facts about the Beastmaster, where the heat never relented and legends were carved from sweat and scars. Number 1. Bare chaos on day 1. Before Dar ever raised a sword, the jungle raised its claws. Marc Singer arrived on set expecting fantasy and walked straight into panic. The production's only trained Russian bear, a massive, unpredictable wall of muscle, snapped from control during young Dar's opening scene. One moment it was performing, the next it lunged at its handler, dragging him to the ground in a frenzy of claws and teeth. Crew members screamed, equipment toppled, people bolted into cars, locking doors like they were hiding from a monster born out of the script. And in the middle of that chaos, Marc Singer watched handlers wrestle the bear back into its cage while medics carried the bleeding trainer away. The dust hadn't even settled when someone turned to him and said, "All right, Marc, you're up." It was the instant he realized the Beastmaster wasn't a fantasy adventure. It was an initiation, a trial by fear, sweat, and wild instinct, a movie where the beasts weren't acting, and neither was he. Number 2. Villain born from disaster. Before Max became the film's robed prophet of death, he was meant to be something far more volatile. Klaus Kinski was the original choice, a performer famous for talent, fury, and contract demands that could break a production before cameras even rolled, and that's exactly what happened. Negotiations collapsed in a storm of arguments, and the role of Max fell into the void. Then Rip Torn stepped in, but he didn't inherit the part. He possessed it. Torn reshaped Max from the bones outward, crafting a hooked prosthetic nose with his own hands, rewriting speeches into ritualistic chants, and moving with the slow, serpent-like precision of a corrupted oracle. Every scene crackled with something unhinged, a villain who didn't act evil, but radiated it like heat. What began as a casting disaster transformed into the film's beating heart of darkness. Kinski would have played a villain. Torn became a myth. Number 3. Myth rebuilt from sci-fi ashes. The Beastmaster didn't crawl out of sword and sorcery. It crashed in from outer space. The film began as a 1959 sci-fi novel about a Navajo soldier on a distant planet. Quiet, thoughtful, built on survival and telepathic bonds with alien animals. No pyramids, no witches, no half-naked barbarians swinging steel under a red sun. Hollywood looked at that gentle, introspective story and kept exactly one thing: a man who could speak to beasts. Everything else was burned away. Spaceships became crumbling temples. Interstellar tribes became desert cults. And the novel's grounded hero was reborn as Dar, a stolen child, carved by witches, raised by prophecy, and destined to fight a death-worshipping empire. Author Andre Norton was so shocked by the transformation that she asked to have her name removed from the credits entirely. To her, it wasn't an adaptation. It was another creature wearing her book's skin. But director Don Coscarelli saw something different, a chance to create a darker, stranger legend built from the ashes of a forgotten world. He wanted haunted pyramids, rotting cults, shapeshifters, and rituals you could almost smell burning off the screen. The studio pushed back, begging for something closer to Conan, but Coscarelli fought to keep the film's nightmares alive. What survived was a hybrid myth, part lost novel, part studio fantasy, part fever dream, a movie born in the desert but haunted by the ghost of the sci-fi tale it used to be. Number 4. Witches carved from nightmares. Before the 3 witches slithered into Dar's destiny, they had to survive a transformation worthy of myth. Their twisted bodies, warped spines, melted faces, limbs like shadows bent the wrong way, weren't CGI illusions. They were layered prosthetics, latex, silicone, glue, and hand-painted rot creeping across their skin. The process took so long that the actresses didn't bother removing it between breaks. They napped in it, ate lunch in it, sat in folding chairs looking like nightmares caught halfway between worlds. The makeup wasn't just a design choice, it was a commitment to a tone. This fantasy wasn't glossy or noble. It was dark, occult, and a little bit sick. The witches didn't just haunt the movie, they haunted the set, living reminders that this world was meant to unsettle, not comfort. Number 5. Destiny rewritten in casting. Long before Tanya Roberts became Kiri in The Desert Heat, another name kept circling the role: Demi Moore. Coscarelli saw something fierce in her auditions, a spark that fit the film's darker edge. He pushed for her, fought for her, imagined her beside Dar in a world of cults, witches, and burning prophecy. But Hollywood is a kingdom ruled by producers, not directors. And the executive producer had other plans. Roberts was chosen, not because she was safer, but because she was marketable. She brought the glossy allure studios wanted in the wake of Conan. Even if Coscarelli's instincts had whispered for something grittier, more slipped away. Roberts stepped in. The wheel of fate turned, And in a story about destiny and stolen futures, the casting itself became part of the myth. One path lost, another carved into the sand. Number 6. Negative lost to time. Every cult film has mysteries, but the Beastmaster has a holy grail, and it's missing. The original camera negative, the master source from which every restoration should be made, didn't end up in a studio vault or an archive. It never even made it into proper storage. Instead, it was kept in a private home tied to one of the film's producers, a place meant for family memories, not cinematic history. When the house changed owners, the cans went with it and vanished. No receipt, no record, just gone. Director Coscarelli has spent years trying to trace its path, following rumors like a treasure hunter picking through old Hollywood ruins. Some say the cans were tossed during a move. Others insist they were boxed up and forgotten in an attic somewhere in Los Angeles. One particularly wild theory claims they were taken by a collector who didn't realize they were holding the only pristine copy of the film. Coscarelli eventually went public, asking fans for leads, turning the movie's own origin story into a real-life quest for a lost artifact. Without that negative, pristine 4K restorations are nearly impossible. Every new transfer feels like peering through fog at a world that once burned bright. Somewhere out there, in a basement, attic, or storage box, the true Beastmaster is still waiting, a missing relic from the age of sword and sorcery that refuses to give up all its secrets. Hear the animals calling from the desert? If you want to step back into Dar's world and feel that wild, dangerous magic again, you can grab your own copy through the links below: DVD, Blu-ray, or even VHS if you're old school. Thanks for the support. It really means a lot. Now, let's return to the sands where legends roam. Number 7. Titles that reshaped Dar. Before the Beastmaster became a cult classic, the film slipped across borders wearing new identities, each one reshaping Dar into a different kind of legend. In some countries, he emerged as Dar the Invincible, a warrior framed as myth before he ever lifted a blade. Japan transformed the tone completely with Miracle Master, selling the film like an enchanted fantasy bursting with wonder instead of the darker, ritual-scarred epic it truly was. And then came Germany, where audiences met him under the stark, heroic banner Beastmaster, Der Befreier, a title that suggested destiny, rebellion, and liberation long before Dar confronted Max's cult. One film, 3 names, each one a doorway into a different myth. Across the globe, Dar didn't just travel. He shape-shifted, becoming whatever legend each culture needed him to be. Number 8. Flirtation that stirred chaos. Chaos didn't just come from animals. Sometimes it came from the cast. On set, Tanya Roberts had a habit of teasing young Josh Milrad, Dar's childhood counterpart. A wink here, a playful comment there. All of it designed for one purpose: to drive Marc Singer absolutely insane. Milrad didn't mind. He later joked he was at that age where girls suddenly became very interesting. But for Singer, sweating through stunts, dodging unpredictable animals, and trying to hold the film together, the off-camera flirtation became its own running gag. In a movie built on cult rituals, dark prophecy, and wild beasts, one of the strangest dynamics wasn't scripted at all. It was a real-life triangle born from nerves, youth, and the desert heat, and it kept the set just unpredictable enough to match the story they were filming. Number 9. Cable turned it immortal. When the Beastmaster limped out of theaters, MGM treated it like a minor footnote, a modest fantasy film that made its money back and nothing more. No big ad campaign, no sequel plans, no future franchise chatter. In Hollywood terms, it came and went like a whisper. But on cable, it roared. HBO picked it up almost immediately, and something strange happened. Programmers fell in love with it. They aired it at dawn, at noon, at midnight, so often that viewers joked HBO stood for "Hey, Beastmaster's on." Kids turned it into a ritual. Night owls treated it like background mythology. Channel surfers stumbled onto it at the exact moment Dar called out to his animals, and got hooked all over again. Then TBS joined the frenzy, running the movie with such devotion that fans crowned it the Beastmaster Station. For a generation growing up in the 80s and 90s, the film didn't feel like a forgotten theatrical underdog. It felt omnipresent, a strange, hypnotic fantasy that belonged to the very fabric of cable TV. What the box office overlooked, cable resurrected. What studios ignored, late-night reruns transformed into legend. And that's how a modest sword and sorcery film, dismissed by its own creators as a nice little release, became a cult myth that refused to die, carried forward by flickering screens and fans who discovered it one rerun at a time. Number 10. Overseas crowned it epic. In America, the Beastmaster didn't stride into theaters. It tiptoed. A quiet release, a modest box office return, and barely a whisper from critics. But overseas, the movie put on its war paint and conquered. Germany was the first to fall under its spell. Distributors noticed something curious. Every time they re-released the film, the crowds got bigger. Fans packed theaters not just for Dar's battles, but for the mythic mood, the deserts, the animals, the occult-soaked visuals that felt wilder and stranger than typical Hollywood fare. Soon Italy, France, Spain, and Scandinavia followed, treating the Beastmaster not as a cult oddity, but as a full-blown fantasy epic. And in some countries, the film never really left. It lived on through midnight screenings, battered VHS tapes with sun-bleached covers, and low-budget TV blocks that treated it like a weekly ritual. Viewers didn't see the compromises or studio fights. They saw a world that felt ancient, dangerous, and alive. Back home, the Beastmaster was just another early 80s fantasy, but abroad it became something bigger, a myth exported, embraced, and replayed until it felt like folklore. America gave it a shrug, the rest of the world gave it a throne. Number 11. Barbarian Fever Reshaped Destiny. Before the Beastmaster found its cult throne, it rode in on the shockwave of Conan the Barbarian. Hollywood suddenly wanted muscle, mysticism, and swords that glinted like prophecy. But Coscarelli's film didn't just copy the trend, it twisted it. Dar wasn't a destroyer. He was a guardian, a warrior bound to animals, speaking to them like brothers forged by fate. That mix of mythic brutality and creature bonding stood apart from the era's steel-clashing heroes. Kids remembered the ferrets before the fights, fans remembered the eagle before the sword, and later fantasy films, TV shows. Even Saturday morning adventures quietly borrowed the same formula, the warrior and his animal allies, a primal team against the world. Among barbarian films built on raw strength, the Beastmaster proved something rare. Sometimes the most powerful magic isn't muscle, but connection. Number 12. A saga revived by loyal fans. Theaters didn't crown the Beastmaster a conqueror, but audiences did. Cable airings turned it into a myth, and myths don't stay small for long. Word spread, tapes circulated, and suddenly the movie's afterlife was louder than its entire theatrical run. Then came the sequels. Beastmaster 2 Through the Portal of Time, a gonzo dimension-hopping cult favorite, and Beastmaster 3 The Eye of Braxis, a fantasy TV staple for 90s kids discovering swords and magic after school. But the real surprise was the TV series. Launching in 1999, it outlasted dozens of bigger-budget fantasies, running 3 full seasons and reaching millions who'd never even seen the original film. The franchise didn't climb by box office. It climbed by endurance, by becoming the kind of story people return to, whether on VHS, cable, or syndicated afternoons. For a film that opened quietly, it built a world loud enough to echo for 2 decades. Some legends grow because they're big, others because they never stop coming back. Bonus fact: Dar's blade wasn't a rubber prop or a dull stunt weapon. It was a real, fully forged sword, sharpened, weighted, and crafted to gleam like destiny under torchlight. Everyone expected it to end up in a prop vault or a museum display. Instead, it disappeared. When production wrapped, the sword simply walked off the set. No signature, no paperwork, no trace. Coscarelli said it was never recovered, not even rumored, not even cited, not even whispered about in collector circles. One of fantasy cinema's great relics slipped into the real world like a stolen enchantment, and somewhere out there, in a garage, a basement, or a forgotten trunk, the Beastmaster's blade still waits. The Beastmaster was never meant to endure. It was a strange, battered fantasy, born from a book it barely followed, shaped by mud, accidents, and sheer stubborn will. But somehow, it walked out of the 80s with something rare, a heartbeat. It gave us Dar, a hero who fought with instinct instead of armor, Max, a villain forged from fire and nightmares, and a world where magic didn't glitter, it hunted. The box office forgot it, but cable loops, VHS tapes, and a generation of wide-eyed kids kept it alive, long after anyone expected. If the Beastmaster ever marked your childhood, or sparked your love of sword and sorcery, tell us in the comments, because some legends shine, some legends roar, but this one survived by pure will, a cult myth wandering through time, still waiting for its next believer.